organization EITI is working towards producing its 6th EITI report to be published before the end of the year. At least 20 mining companies have been identified to report for 2014 fiscal year. No threshold is set for oil and gas companies. Well, mining companies are expected to also make known what their corporate social responsibilities have been. Well, in the studio is Mohamed Fernando Conte. He's the EITI Communications Officer. Welcome to the program, Mohamed.
Thank you, Asmi, for having me.
Now let's look at the previous reports that EITI Sierra Leone had published. How did they go?
Yeah, we've produced at least 4 EITI reports covering 2006, 2007, 2008, 2010, 2011, and 2013. The 2012 reports is currently being produced, but the focus at the moment is on the 2014 EITI report, which is due for publication as against 31st December.
Okay.
So that report was published, but it is yet to be launched, owing to the fact that the 2012 report is still being produced, and we are working towards the production of our 6th EITI report. So we want to ensure that we put all the 3 reports together. And
I mean, this issue of revenue streams and the mining sector is one of the badly hit areas as a result of the Ebola. It's one of the areas that government was having lots of money, but that is not the case at the moment. What has the EITI report found out?
Well, we realized from the fact that from the 2013 EITI report, we have at least 22 mining companies reported for that fiscal year. But for this 2014 EITI report, we've identified at least 20 mining companies to report. So that seems to be some amount of difference. But so far, the multi-stakeholder group will identify the threshold under which mining companies should report. So the threshold for the 2014 EITI report is something which is tagged around $100,000. That is, all companies who pay that amount and above are entitled to report. For the previous report, the figures to some extent are not the same like this one. So it is not the usual manner in which reports are being produced, but it follows the pattern, i.e. you have your independent administrator, the multi-stakeholder group, identify the threshold and the reporting entities, and then you work on the reporting parameters.
Okay, now this issue of $100,000, and previously how much was it?
Previously it was around 95, 97. So this year we have something like $100,000. So like we have at least 3 or 4% increment, into the reporting threshold.
So are we going to see more companies being vetted?
Well, for so far, it all depends on the threshold. At the same time, the number of companies that the multi-stakeholder group want to endorse for reporting, because so far, without the materiality threshold, you'll not be able to identify the number of mining companies or the entities that will report. So it is against that threshold that we normally target all the mining companies that meet that threshold, because we don't want to ensure that we increase the threshold or we lower the threshold, and then we have a number of mining companies who will report at the end of the day they did not report, and they will end up having an issue with that report. So we set the best standard based on the EITI requirements and based on the judgment of the multi-stakeholder group.
One problem that the EITI has been facing with mining companies is the issue of their tax receipts.
Well, that one has to do with the fact that whenever we request for whenever we share our templates with them, sometimes they do find it difficult to attach their receipts. But the process goes through an independent administrator, and then it goes through a process that is called an auditing standard. So once they are able to pass through those standards, and then we can accept them. But if they don't pass through those standards, they don't meet the standards, and then it's an issue. So always for mining companies, their templates are being certified by their independent auditing firms before they are being sent to us.
Okay. Now another issue that we are expecting to see, this issue of corporate social responsibility. Many times you see mining companies, they go to the communities where they operate, they dish out some largesse, give out some school or some learning or teaching materials. They say they've done what their corporate social responsibility is.
Yes, it do happens, and it is a practice that is not binding and obligatory to the mining companies. It is negotiable between the communities, sometimes the government, sometimes when the contracts are being signed. So what is important is the fact that this year, the 2014 EITI report has identified the fact that mining companies are supposed, to report on their corporate social responsibilities to ensure that people exactly know what is the quantum, what is the cost, of, the amount they've been using, or what is their basic they put together for that corporate social responsibility. It's not binding and obligatory, but want to ensure that we have this report, we know what is involved in their corporate social responsibility, so that the general public will know
how would you ensure that the right figures are given to, because the companies want to look good, they want to appear good, so you may not know, maybe they might even bloat the figures that they've spent on what they call corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, they might, but as I said earlier, it goes through a standards. You have to attach your receipt. Once you attach your receipt, and then I'll be able to determine whether the figures are cooked up or not.
There was also this issue of disclosing the identity of those who own mining companies. Many times, people don't know who own mining companies, and that is something people have been calling for to be included in some of the EITI reports.
Yes, that is beneficial ownership disclosure. It is one of the major requirements at the moment in the 2016 standard. At the moment, it is encouraged. However, by 2020, it's going to be mandatory that all implementing countries must publish, the beneficial ownership of people who own mining companies operating in their territory. So by 2017, Sierra Leone is expected to publish their beneficial ownership roadmap, which roadmap we want to introduce to ensure that by 2020 we have the beneficial ownership disclosure information available. So what we've done so far is to put together a small working team, to ensure that we have this report, the information collected. So we hired a consultant to produce, just the preliminary information on the beneficial ownership study in Sierra Leone, and that document serves as a working document for us at the moment. So it's quite important. It's one of the key issues the International Secretariat is pushing at the moment, beneficial ownership disclosure.
What about the oil and gas companies, or those who may, because Sierra Leone is not mining oil and gas, but there are prospects that maybe there will come a time, few years from now, oil and gas are expected to be mined in Sierra Leone.
Yes, and that is why we have the Petroleum Directorate, they're in charge, and then whatever gas sector also been identified to report for the 2014 fiscal year. And so we track all the companies, that have, done some work within that period, and they will ask them to report so that we have exactly a clear picture of what amount, those companies pay, to the government of Sierra Leone.
I mean, what EITI normally finds, and what the government, what NI, for instance, reports, are they at variance, or do you sing from the same hymn sheet?
Well, and there are sometimes some discrepancies. Sometimes the government under-report, or sometimes the mining companies under-report. And then where there are discrepancies, we ask for more information, more evidences to ensure that the information is balanced. But beyond that, I think it's quite important to ensure that all the companies, all the entities, they produce their report, and that they produce their template, attach all the requirements, that is the bank statement and then the receipt so far, and then the independent administrator will determine and then process the data. So at the moment we're in the data collection stage for the 2014 EITI fiscal report. So we've distributed our template to all the entities, and then so far at the moment we are collecting those templates from all the entities. Besides, we also targeted MPs for this year, because it's quite important for MPs also to report the 10% surface rent they receive as constituency development for our community development fund, for mining companies operating in their areas. So it's going to be...
Have they been reporting?
Well, no, initially they were not. Last year we made an attempt to ask them to report, but we felt it is important to ensure that this time around, according to the multi-stakeholder group, they report, because it's quite important so that the report will be comprehensive. And
as we are trying to round up the program, when specifically are we expecting to see the reports?
Well, the report is due for publication against 31st December. Okay. That is the deadline, and it will not be extended because the International Secretariat has its deadline under which all countries must be able to submit its report. So that is the timeline we are working against. So beyond that, we've also ensured that we set up our timelines under which the report will be formally launched So once we have the report, then we can at least publish and formally launch and disseminate.
So give us a high point of the reports.
Well, EITI report is produced annually,
Okay.
and then it covers the revenue streams, under which government receive benefit, and then we talk to the government to produce its own receipt, and then we talk to the mining companies to produce their own receipt, and then it is being reconciled by an independent administrator. An independent administrator will sometimes do what is required according to the EITI standard. One, an overview of the mining sector in Sierra Leone, the laws governing the mining sector, the fiscal regime. At the same time, it shed light, on the employment, and then beneficial ownership. If the information is available, what we did talk about initially, if the information is available, and then the contribution, by sector. For instance, how much the mining companies contribute to the GDP, how much the oil and gas company contribute, and then we look at the revenue streams as well. We assess or we determine how the revenue streams to themselves contribute. For instance, if royalty is the highest contributing revenue stream, or whether surface rent, all this information, you see this information in the report. At the end of the day, and the report is disseminated to contribute to public debate, at the same time to ensure that the mining companies are better managed, to ensure that Sierra Leoneans benefits, from the process.
Do you normally provide recommendations?
Yeah, there are recommendations. We
as
don't
to
provide
as to areas that are to be improved.
We don't provide recommendations. It is a report, because the report is not being produced by the Secretariat. It's produced by an independent administrator for the government of Sierra Leone. So the government of Sierra Leone will then see which ministries, which MDs are responsible to ensure that those recommendations are being streamed or are being acted upon.
Okay.
That is one of the major requirements as well. That is, you take assessment of what the recommendations are, and then you see how best you can implement those recommendations.
Okay, well, that's it. He is Mohamed Fernando Conte, the communications person of Sierra Leone EITI. Well, that's how we descend the podium for today. On behalf of the production team, especially my producer Salmata, I've been your host Asmi Batin. We join you again tomorrow.